Before we really get rolling, I'll introduce myself. My name's Aidan Riley. I'm an assistant director here at the University of Buffalo. I'm an assistant director with football only. My main job here is to work directly with our return to play athletes. So anybody that has a small injury, big injury, hey, I roll my ankle, I'm going to miss practice to all the way up to I tore an ACL and I'm going to be out for the next 9 months. So that's my main job. And then secondary priority is to build out our off-season program with our head strength coach, Coach Horton. And then I also work directly with our interns and trying to develop them as young coaches. That's kind of how this whole thing came together is, you know, Sean, you reached out to Coach Horton, and with me doing all of our education work with our interns, it seemed like a good fit of something that we could do to hopefully provide a little bit of information to y'all, of different things that you can bring to the weight room and different ways to think about training. A lot of times, especially in the high school setting, most of what we do as young athletes or coaches is what we see online. And sometimes that's not the best stuff to do. So we're going to talk about just very basics, foundations that we need to attack that are going to help us not only for football, but really for any athletic related activity. So, very brief overview about me. I was at Temple University. I was a GA and an intern there. At the University of Miami, I worked as an undergraduate or extern, which basically just means I was a paid intern. Then I went to Northern Illinois University, which is out in the middle of nowhere, Illinois. I worked with football, baseball, wrestling, gymnastics, soccer. I worked with a number of different teams, which really allowed me to hone in on some different ways to train and some different things that you could do to help athletes. And then, like I just kind of mentioned, most recently and currently, I'm at the University at Buffalo, up here in New York. Before I continue and really dive into the weeds of this, I talk fast. I don't deny it. I'm going to try to slow myself down. So if at any point in time you're like, "Hey, coach, can you go back and, say that again or review that?" Just go ahead, unmute yourself, holler it out, and we'll go back and answer it for you, okay? See a couple of nods in there. All right. I appreciate that. So, why do we train? What is our foundation of training? So the reason that we train in the weight room is to enhance mobility, movement quality, and athleticism. All right. And then the secondary goal is to reduce the risk of injury. Now, and we'll talk about it in a couple slides here, there's no true way to prevent injuries from happening. It doesn't happen. You're playing football, it's contact sport, it's a physical sport. Football injuries happen. If you don't want football injuries to happen, go play chess. Go play for the chess team. If you're playing chess, probably not a lot of football injuries that happen. All right. So when we start talking about our foundations, we're going to reference this pyramid that you guys see on the right here on this slide. We're going to talk about this pyramid a lot, and we'll dive into each layer specifically. And I'm going to try not to get too nerdy and try to make it very applicable to what we do in the weight room. But why do we train? Those two things I just said. The first step is to build a foundation of work capacity. That has to be specific to what we are doing. It has to be specific to what we're training for. For the purpose of this, we're trained to be better football players. So that's what we're trying to build. The next piece and why do we train? Enhance the qualities of hypertrophy and strength for physical development. What's that mean? Get bigger and stronger. Then we want to enhance power, speed, and agility for carryover to sport. What's that mean? Get more explosive and get faster. Then we want to facilitate training or recovery from training to competition. When we talk about facilitating recovery in the weight room setting, what we mean, anything we do in the weight room can't take away from what we do on the field, right? So if I'm going to go play a game on Saturday, it doesn't make sense to go for squat heavy on Friday because I'm probably still going to be sore and then I'm going to roll into that game in a bad spot. All right. These qualities that we're going to dive into here piece by piece in a second, we want to train these qualities year round. But just like a pyramid, we need to establish the base first before we really build up to the next layer. So we're going to train all of these things year round, but as we build up as we go, or I'm sorry, we're going to build up as we go. So that way we get the most out of our speed, our power, our strength, and all the way down to work capacity. All right, training the qualities through this pyramid not only carries over to football, but any athletic activity that you do. And then the last thing, which I wrote up here in bold, start training the right way early to set yourself up for sustained success. All right. All the stuff we're going to talk about here is the very basics, day one type training. If you learn how to do it the right way early, you're going to set yourself up for success when you get to the next level, when you get to college, right? One of the things that Sean and I were talking about before a lot of people hopped on is one of the things that I still see with a lot of kids that come here or go to any school is they might have lifted, but they don't lift well. So if you train the right way and you're going to set yourself up for success when you get to that next level. All right, so we're talking about building the base, right? That first level is evaluation and testing. So first, second, and third step is technique. All right, we're not going to progress anything that we do until our movements are where we want them to be. So when I say evaluate and test, we're trying to establish what you can do and how well you do it. So for example, if you look at the left here, the three diagrams, all right, if I want a back squat, that's what I want to work to. We're going to go back squat. We're going to train a back squat heavy. Well, I'm not going to back squat until I know you can do a really good front squat. And we're not going to front squat until I know you can do a really good goblet squat. And if that means we have to spend an extra week or an extra 2 weeks building at each of those layers before I get to a back squat, that's fine. Because it's not about the weight that's on the bar, it's about your technique and how well you can do it. So, the first thing I need to do is establish what I'm trying to get to. If I'm trying to get to a back squat, I got to build up to that. So that's when we start talking about work capacity, that bottom base of the pyramid. So work capacity and strength is really simple. Work capacity simply means establishing a base of volume in the movements you're going to do that you will be executing within your program. So I have a base of work underneath my belt. If I'm going to go back squat a 1 RM, as heavy as I can possibly go, I need to have the ability to do repeated reps before I go up for that 1 RM, right? So I can't just walk into the weight room, warm up, and hit a really good 1 rep max squat. I need to develop a base first. What does our base look like? I might be doing sets of 5, sets of 6, sets of 7 to build up technique, form, and then basic strength before I start jumping the gun and going really heavy. Then when we start talking about strength, the next piece of that pyramid, it's not, hey, what's my 1 RM? What's the most weight I could possibly do? It doesn't refer just to 1 rep maxes. I want to get stronger in each individual muscle group that I'm training, right? How do I do that? By training with moderate weight, with really good reps and really good technique. And what movements will I get the most out of in these two areas? That's where we get down into this bottom third right here. Squatting, hinging, pressing, pulling, single leg work, core strength and core stability. All right. That's where I get the most out of work capacity and strength. And I'll say it again down here in the bottom right, just because it's not heavy doesn't mean you're not getting stronger, right? If we're emphasizing form and technique, which you're going to hear me say about a dozen more times, if we're emphasizing form and technique, if I'm doing it with good form, good technique, it doesn't really matter what the weight is. You're going to get better. You're going to get stronger. So the next piece of the pyramid is power. Power essentially means being explosive, being fast with weight, right? So when we separate power and speed, speed refers to as fast as I can possibly be. In the weight room, that might be a jump, it might be a sprint. On the field, it's doing your sport at fast pace, right? In the weight room, when we talk about explosive strength, we're talking about our cleans, our snatches, our jerks, our weighted jumps, our plyos, things of that nature. And again, this area of our pyramid does not need to be heavy. It needs to be fast and explosive. So when we talk about what percentage I'm going to work on, I'm going to live in that 50 to 80% range, and I'm going to move weight fast. These movements, those movements that I just listed right there, are more technical. We're going to talk about technique here in a few minutes of those movements. Technique here is a key. I can't walk into the weight room and be like, all right, I'm going to go power clean really heavy. If you've never done a power clean before, you probably got to start with something simpler, like a hang clean or a high pull or something simpler so you can teach yourself how to do the movement before you start loading it up and jumping in with heavy weights. And then the last piece of the pyramid is speed. And the reason that it's the top of the pyramid, if anybody watched the NFL Combine last week or 2 weeks ago now, I guess, what's the only thing that they showed? 40-yard dash. That's because the only thing that really anybody cares about is how do I get faster for my sport. And that doesn't just mean, all right, if I'm a wide receiver, how fast can I run a go ball? It can also be a linebacker and how quickly do I change direction and get to a different spot, right? It could be a defensive lineman. How quickly do I get off the ball and get in the backfield? So when we talk about speed, we're referring to those fast, twitchy motions that I need to be able to tackle on the field. Speed is also the most intense thing that your central nervous system can take. So that's why we have to build a base of all these other pieces to one, be able to handle doing heavy or doing intense speed work, but then two, be able to get the most out of it. If I don't establish a base and build my way up to speed, I'm probably not going to get much faster. You can go outside and sprint right now. We all can. But just because I went out and sprinted doesn't mean I'm actually going to get any better at sprinting. I want to build through the base of that pyramid, work capacity to strength to the power realm to speed, and then I will get more out of my speed work. All right. And like I said there, speed doesn't apply just to max velocity. How fast can I sprint in a straight line? But accelerating, decelerating, changing direction quicker. And we need the speed to translate to the field. We need the speed to translate to the field. It's kind of the last thing for that piece because a lot of people think, all right, well, I went out and I did 50 yards. And I went 50 yards as fast as I could. And I did it over and over and over again. Well, if you're a defensive lineman, does that necessarily help you on the field? Right? If you're an offensive lineman, does that necessarily help you on the field? No, we want the speed that we work on to translate to what we do as a football player. And that applies to any sport. When I worked with golf at Northern Illinois, I didn't just take golf out and sprint in a straight line as fast as I could. You know how much a golfer sprints during a round? Zero. That much. They don't sprint very much. Now we did do some speed work, but we did some stuff that was going to translate to golf. All right. So how we do what we do. And again, the first thing that's on here, let's talk technique. I've already talked about it a lot. The little movements, you're going to figure out fast. Your single arm rows, your delts, your curls, your abs. You figure that stuff out quick. All right. We're going to get more development out of our big compound movements than the small isolation movements. In strength conditioning, that's what we refer to as the 80-20 rule. 80% of our gains come from 20% of the work. The 20% of our work are these movements that are listed right here. Your cleans, your snatches, your jerks or overhead variations, your squats, your pulls, posterior chain work, and your presses. That 20% of your movements is going to really take up 80% of your total gains that you're going to make in the weight room. So when we start talking about our Olympic lifts, the very first thing that we do with all of our guys here at Buffalo is overhead squat. See how this video goes. All right, so before we want to do any overhead variations like snatching or jerking or even doing an overhead press, we want to build up having a really good overhead squat first because one, it's a great movement to see how a guy bends with a load. See if it'll let me skip this ad. There we go. Did this to me today too. All right, so an overhead squat's a great movement because one, we can see how a guy bends and how they move, but also before we start doing any overhead movements, I want to be able to have a bar over my head, stabilize, brace, and go through the movement. So the athlete that's on the screen here, this is Tad Barr. He's one of our former football players here. So you'll see his feet are set up no different than he would for a back squat. The bar is sitting just behind his ears. He's braced tightly, his core is engaged, his low back is tight, and then he's sitting into a good squat. He's sitting through his heels, his knees are driving out, and then when he stands up, he's not dropping his chest forward. He's nice and controlled through the upright part of the motion. All right. The reason we always start with that overhead squat is because everything we just talked about, being able to bend, being able to stabilize with a load over our head, that is extremely important to all of our Olympic lifts. All right, so we want to be able to establish a base with that before we progress to anything else. I do apologize if the video gets a little choppy here. I think with the videos, it slows down just a touch, so I apologize for that. All right, the next one we'll talk about is a hang power clean. Like I said before, if you turn on the Olympics, if you turn on Instagram, you're going to see heavy power cleans or even a full clean. One of the easiest variations of a clean to start with is a hang power clean. So if you notice Tad here, he starts with the bar at his hips. He slides the bar down his legs. The bar stops just above his knees. He aggressively pulls the bar, explodes to his toes, snaps his elbows through. And when he catches the bar, he's got his elbows up, his butt down, and his knees are bent with his feet flat. That is exactly what we want the motion to look like. This is a great movement to obviously produce a lot of power through my hips, through my low back, but then also to stabilize by catching a load. So when Tad actually catches the bar, he is absorbing a load. Why is that important for football? Because you're going to hit people, right? And that absorbing a load, absorbing contact is very important when you actually get to the football field. And the last Olympic lift we'll talk about here, when it lets me go, there we go, is a hang power snatch. So you have the same setup that we just talked about with the hang power clean, right? The bar is at my hips, the bar stays very tight to my body. I slide the bar along my legs, but now instead of catching in that front rack position like a front squat, I'm going to catch it over my head like we did with the overhead squat a couple slides ago. Ads are killing me here. Sheesh. There we go. All right, so Tad's now in a wide grip. He's got his knuckles turned down to the ground. He slides that bar down his thighs, aggressively jumps and shrugs. That's that triple extension piece that we talked about before. And then he snaps his arms through at the top and catches it in that overhead squat position. Now, notice again, knees are bent, hips are back when he catches the bar. That's what we call a power position. It allows us to absorb that load. All right, so when we talk about our Olympic lifts, those are the big three that we're going to touch on today: an overhead squat, a hang power clean, and a hang power snatch. Our goal of our Olympic lifts is to produce power fast. All right, we want to have aggressive triple extension every single rep. Triple extension, all that means is exploding to my toes, where I'm getting extension at the ankle, the knee, and the hip. That is going to translate directly to football, not just sprinting, but creating contact and then accelerating and decelerating. Common issues with our Olympic lifts: guys push the weight too fast, too quick. They're highly technical movements. Remember what we said a few slides ago when we talked about power and being a powerful athlete. We don't need to go crazy heavy, but we need to move the weight fast. So when I start doing my Olympic lifts, keep the weight light, dominate the technique, and then I can progress. Your total reps should be under 20. All right. When we're looking at it, let's say I'm doing a hang clean and I'm doing hang cleans for the day. I'm not going to do more than 20 total reps. All right. And then reps in a given set will be five or less. And honestly, four is probably the top end of what we would ever do here at Buffalo with our guys. Just because we got a little bit of time, any guy shouted out. Why would we not do more than four reps? Or why would we not do more than five reps?
Power over endurance.
Yes, exactly. So when we train our Olympic movements, like we said, we want to be powerful and explosive. If I start doing four, five, six, seven, 8 reps, I'm not getting that. I'm not training that piece. So why would I do that if I'm not training what I want to get out of it? So all the stuff we talked about, if I want to be fast, powerful, and explosive, I want to get in under 4 reps. That's the time where I'm going to be most explosive. And then I take a rest, right? Take that 90 seconds to 2 minutes in between my sets. I go back and I dominate the next set. All right. Then we'll talk about our strength movements. All right. A back squat is the main one that we're going to talk about here because the back squat is our main squat that we do here with our athletes. All right. Okay, so you'll see another former player here, Taji Johnson. Okay, he actually now works with us at UB. All right, Taji's going to set his feet. and he's going to go into our back squat. Now, whenever we say set your feet, we want your feet flat in the ground, dug into the floor. All right. So Taji, come on now. There we go. Sorry about the videos, guys. I'm working earlier. There we go. All right. He sets his feet. He's got his feet screwed into the ground, and then he goes into his actual squat pattern. When we talk about our squat pattern, I want to push my butt back and then I want to bend my knees. All right. There's no need to overcomplicate it past that, but I need to push my butt back just a little bit to allow room for my body to go down. So he's going to take his knees and he's going to push them out. He's going to drive his chest up. And the reason we always drive our chest up, you're going to see it online where people drop their chest and allow their low back to do most of the work. We're going to train the low back in a bunch of different ways. The squat, we're trying to train the quads, the glutes, the lower body. So I don't get a ton out of it if I just drop my chest and allow my low back to do all the work. All right, this is one of the most important movements that we're going to do to build lower body strength in the weight room. There we go. All right. Bench press. Not even going to show you the video because I think everybody here knows how to bench press. If there's one thing that high school kids love to do, it's arms. All right. Now, when we talk bench press, I think the number one thing that guys screw up here is they load the weight way too fast and they love just going heavy. How much do you bench? What's the most you could bench? No different than we talked about with the pyramid. I got to develop a base first, right? I want to do more reps with good technique and good form before I start loading it up really heavy. And then the last strength piece that we'll talk about is the RDL. All right. Now, the RDL is what we would consider here posterior chain work. And when I say posterior chain, I'm referring from the base of your skull all the way down to your calves. That includes your entire backside. So the RDL is a foundational movement to train essentially all of that when you do it. Now, you don't have to just use the RDL to train that posterior chain. Other movements could be your hyperextensions, your reverse hypers, your heavy shrugs, or even a deadlift. Now, here at Buffalo, we don't necessarily do a ton of deadlifting because we're doing a ton of those Olympic lifts. And when we do the Olympic lifts, we're already training all those muscles that we train in a deadlift. All right, so to watch Tad here again, he's going to set up like he's going to do a hang power clean. The bar is at his hips. He's going to slide that bar down his knees, and it's going to look exactly the same, except for the fact that the bar crosses his knees. It gets to the mid shin area, and then he nice and control squeezes the bar nice and close to his body while squeezing his butt back in. So you'll notice this movement, unlike a squat, right? Unlike a squat where I push my butt back and then I bend my knees, here I just keep pushing my butt back until my body is essentially parallel to the ground. It's a great movement to train your entire posterior chain. All right, that's the last video, so let's see if the zoom starts to tighten back up. So our goal with our strength movements is to develop full body strength that's going to carry over to the sport. And again, technique over weight is it's a must. All right. You can train with lighter weight and still get stronger. What are the common issues here? Just like I said with the Olympic lifts, pushing the weight too fast while not hammering technique. A super easy way here to get great work out of what you do is just slow your movement down. I want to go slow on the way down and get that eccentric focus. If I get a great eccentric focus with every rep, I'm gonna get stronger in what I do. All right. Now we talked about three pretty basic and pretty main movements that you'll see, but let's say we don't have the equipment to back squat, or we can't back squat, or I'm not good enough at back squatting yet. What did we already talk about? You could front squat, you could goblet squat. There's a ton of different variations you could do. Same thing with the RDL. I can do a trap bar deadlift. I can do a hyperextension. Same thing with the bench press. I could do an incline bench press or a dumbbell bench press. All of these movements are still strength movements. They're just different ways to do it. No different than the Olympic lifts. I'll tell you kind of what your total work should be. So, in my actual movement, if I'm benching, if I'm squatting, whatever it may be, my total work should be 35 to 40 reps, somewhere in that range, maybe a little bit up, maybe a little bit down. And then each set should be in that 3 to 8 rep range. Unlike our Olympic lifts, where we want to be fast, powerful, and explosive, this is where we build our strength base. So each set can be 3 to 8 reps where I'm getting good quality work. And obviously, if I'm doing 8 reps, the weight's probably going to be a little bit lighter than if I'm doing 3 reps. And then the last piece are our accessory lifts. Now, like I said, your 80-20 rule, right? There's a lot more accessory lifts you can do. There's a lot of other things that you're sitting there, you go, Coach, he didn't talk about this or he didn't talk about this. The 20% of our work, those 7 main movements that we talked about, are going to lead to 80% of our gains. So the accessory lifts are the 80% of the other stuff that only account for 20% of our gains. So our goal of our accessory lifts is to target some of the areas that we might miss with our big stuff. And we want these accessory lifts to reinforce what we do with our big lifts. This is where we bump up the reps. This is where we try to get bigger. We try to add some size. So we want to be in that 6 to 12 rep range. Our good accessory movements for our football players, rows, our lunges, our single leg work, abs, core. When I say core, doesn't just mean crunches or sit-ups or Russian twists. I'm talking about farmer's carries, suitcase carries, different core work where I'm engaging my entire trunk. Your arm work, whether it's biceps or triceps, which I'm sure most of you guys love doing. Your shoulder work, like your delts, your rotator cuff work, your grip, and then lastly, neck, which will lead us into our injury prevention talk here. Again, I'll ask a question to the group. Why is neck a really important thing to train with football players? Matthew, go ahead. You look like you're thinking about it.
Because you can lead with your head a lot, and that's a part that's usually underdeveloped.
Yeah, exactly. It's not necessarily underdeveloped, but in football, right, you're going to get hit here a lot, right? And a lot of the stuff that we just talked about, we're training from here down. So when we say neck training, we're trying to stabilize this because at some point you're going to get hit in this. All right. Now, one of the misconceptions that you'll see out there, oops, sorry, jumped ahead too quick. One of the misconceptions that you'll see out there is if you do neck training, it'll prevent you from getting concussions. It's one of the things you'll see online. That's just simply not true. Concussions happen. They're a part of the sport. If I reinforce the strength in my neck, it can potentially lead to a decreased risk of concussions, but it doesn't completely mitigate it. All right. And then the last piece is running. All right. What about our field work? What about what we do on the field? Guess what? We'll utilize the pyramid for that too. I got to evaluate and see how guys move, how you cut, how you run. Then I build a base of work capacity. Work capacity for football, to be specific, really just means how do I get you in shape for football? All right. One of the things that people do, still do at a lot of colleges and a lot of universities around the country is they go out and they run half gassers, or they run 300-yard shuttles, or they do 110s. What we do to prepare you for football has to be specific for football. Football plays last 4 to 6 seconds, and then you have a 30-second break. So it doesn't make a lot of sense for us to go run 30 or 40 seconds at a time because that's not really going to carry over to what you're going to do on the field, right? You might get in really good shape to go run cross country. Just because you're a good cross country runner doesn't mean you're in shape to play football, right? When I trained wrestling, we did tons of track sprints. We did 400 meter runs. We did 300-meter shuttles. We did a lot of that stuff because guess what? In wrestling, you're literally grappling another human being for 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes, and then overtime. So I tried to prepare them for those longer bouts of energy. Where in football, we're really prepared for 4 to 6 seconds, and then you have a 30-second break. So when we establish work capacity, I need to make it specific to what I do. Then when we talk about power, right, and strength, it's really just cutting and changing direction, putting my foot in the ground and bursting a different way. I put it down here. Foot ladders don't help you guys. That doesn't help you. Because if you watch a football player, when they change direction, you stick your foot in the ground. Let's say I stick my left foot in the ground and then I go right as fast as I possibly can. A foot ladder doesn't really help you with that, right? It might get your feet moving faster, but it doesn't help you change direction quick. And then the top of the pyramid is speed. I got to build up all those basic things in the weight room and on the field, and then I take it into my speed work, and that's truly where you get faster. And then the last piece down here, which kind of got blocked out by this picture, the best way to train your field movements for football is to play football. It's the number one way to do it, right? If you work with basketball and you want to go get a basketball player in better shape, guess what? We're going to go play basketball. If you work with a wrestler, the best way to get them in better wrestling shape is to go wrestle with a guy. So when we're talking about getting ready to go play football, one of the best things we can do to do that is go play football. And then the direct carryover, excuse me, the direct carryover is that triple extension piece that we talked about. By training within the pyramid, executing the movements with great technique, you're going to build a great base of work capacity, strength, and power and speed that will translate to the field. But again, the technique has to be there first. If you're executing all those movements that we talked about with bad technique, it's not going to help carry over. And that triple extension piece, which I mentioned a bunch of times, that explosive power that we're trying to create, you see it all over the football field. You see it when we sprint, like this guy right here. You see it when we create contact, like this guy right here, who's actually hitting somebody. But that extension at the knee, the hip, and the ankle, that's going to directly carry over to what we're going to do on the football field. And then injury prevention it's a pretty quick topic, guys. It's a physical sport, and there's no perfect way to eliminate injuries. Injuries happen. The best way to do it is by having good technique in the weight room. Why do I say that? Because if you're getting hurt in the weight room, then you're already setting yourself up for failure on the field. Because I'm hurt in the weight room. Hey, coach, I can't practice. Hey, I can't go do this session because I got hurt in the weight room because I had bad technique, right? So to start, the six basic principles that I look at, having good mobility and flexibility, right? If I have good mobility and flexibility, that really applies to my movements that I do. It's going to help me with my squatting, my cleaning, my snatching, all the above. Muscle strength is just all the stuff that we talked about, being able to squat, being able to hinge, being able to do your rows, and all those movements that we discussed already. Endurance is simply work capacity. Am I in shape for my sport? Motor control training is your technique. Am I technical with my movements? Do I have control of my body? And then the last piece is rest and recovery. Rest and recovery is probably the most crucial thing that I see with any athletes. Because 99% of the time, when coach says, hey, you need to get better at this, what do? We add more of that and we don't change anything else. If I add more, something's getting taken away. All right. Now, just a question. What are the most common football injuries? And how can we train to reduce the risk of getting any of those injuries? Like, what do you think one of the most common injuries are? We already talked a little bit about concussions, but throw one out there. What's another common injury that we can train to reduce?
Ankle sprain.
Ankles. Matthew, what'd you say?
I was gonna say just general leg injuries.
General leg injuries. All right, so ankles are perfect, right? We talked about triple extension a million times here, right? That position right there, where I'm extending through that ankle, the knee, and the hip. We train the ankles every time that we jump, every time we cut, and every time we reach triple extension in the weight room with our cleans, with our snatches, with our jerks, and our overhead variations. So the more that I can reach this position right here, where I'm driving my toe into the ground, I'm extending, I'm training that ankle. All right, general lower body injuries, Matt, right? If I have strong legs, strong glutes, strong hips, strong hamstrings, I'm going to take care of a lot of those injuries by themselves. And that's where we start talking about our squatting, our single leg work, our hamstring work that we discussed already with like our RDLs. If I have a strong lower body, I'm going to reduce the chances of getting hurt on the field. All right, and then the last piece that I'll really talk about today is rest, recovery, and nutrition. All right. One of the biggest things that I think I know and I've seen, and I'm kind of guilty of this myself sometimes too. I'm like, man, I want to get stronger. Man, I want to get faster. And I load up with what I do in the weight room or on the field. What you do when you're not training is more important than what you do when you're training. I'll say that again. What you do when you're not training is more important than what you do with your training. And the reason for that is if you have a long workout or a long session, you're talking maybe 2 hours, probably an hour and a half. And if you're really crazy, maybe 2.5 hours. What are you doing for the other 22, 21 hours in the day to take care of your body to recover? So injury prevention doesn't just happen in the weight room, it's off the field. So sleep. Your body utilizes sleep to recover. The number one time that your body releases testosterone and growth hormone is when you sleep. So if I don't get 8+ hours a night, I am missing out on those gains. Nutrition, not only eating clean, right? Because we all hear eating clean and we think of what we saw on TV, right? I ate lots of fruit, I ate lots of steak and chicken and rice, right? It's not just necessarily eating clean, but it's eating enough to replace what I burned. So, how often, as a young high school athlete or even a college athlete, if you're almost there, how often should you be eating? Go ahead, Connor. You look like you're locked in.
I'd say every 2 hours.
Yep, that's pretty close right there. We tell our athletes here every 2.5 to 4 hours, you need to be consuming calories. So when we say consuming calories, I'm not saying every 2.5 to 4 hours you have to eat a 2,000 calorie meal, right? But every 2.5 to 4 hours, I need to be getting 3, 4, 500 calories into my system. How can I do that? Sandwiches, snacks, fruit, or even something as simple as eat or drinking a Powerade, or drinking milk, or drinking chocolate milk. So really good ways to get extra calories into your system so you can recover for your next activity. And then down here, I put a couple of guidelines for athletes. So, what are some good guidelines that you can follow when looking at your nutrition? My proteins, which includes, your cow, your pig, your chicken, lamb, fish, any of those things, any of your big protein groups. Your goal, if you're trying to gain strength and gain size, should be to eat 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. Or if you're American like me, 1 gram per pound of body weight. So if you weigh 185 pounds, your goal should be to get to 185 grams of protein a day. Now that's a large number, and especially if you're a bigger guy like an offensive lineman, you're like, coach, like 250 calories or 250 grams of protein is a lot. It's a goal. You don't need to be directly there, but you need to be getting towards that. Same thing with your fats. And then notice carbs are the highest one there. You want to be consuming 3.5 to 6.5 grams of carbs per kilogram of body weight, right? Your carbs are not just your rice, your pasta, that also accounts for your fruit, your veggies, and things that are going to give you the most energy on the field.
Is this all for is this all you should eat, how much you should eat as an offensive lineman or just as a lineman?
Hold on a second, my screen froze. All right, say that again.
Is that how much you should eat as as a lineman, mainly as a lineman?
Nope, that's everybody, right? If we're all of
Everybody.
us here as a high school athlete are trying to get bigger, get stronger, build strength for the field, right? So if I weigh 100
Okay.
kilos, if I weigh
I
100
see.
kilos, I should be trying to get to 200 grams of protein every day, right? You know what I mean? And then it falls so on and so forth from that. So it's not just directly being a lineman, but it's all of us. And then
I see.
the last thing that I'll say when it comes to fatigue, recovery, rest, recovery, nutrition. Consistency, habits, and routine will allow your body to consistently grow and recover. What does that mean? That means if Monday through Friday, I wake up at 7 a.m., I have my first meal, and then I go work out, and then I go to class, don't change your routine. Keep a similar routine through the entire week so your body gets used to that and gets adapted to that. If I change my routine every day, or if I'm the guy that goes Monday through Friday, I have a good routine, and then Saturday and Sunday, I have a horrible routine, I'm not getting the most out of my rest, recovery, and nutrition. Create a routine, be consistent with that routine, and make it a habit so it stays consistent. All right. I wanted to take, the last 10, 15 minutes or however much time we have left and open it up to you guys. I went over a lot of stuff there. I know I touched on a lot of different things. What questions do y'all have for me?
Aiden, I'll kick it off. For a young man who's just starting out in the gym, who's unsure how to get going, where to go, what to do, what's the best resource for him to tap into if he doesn't have another individual to lean on that he can learn about the gym and lifting and how to do it properly?
It's a good question. If you're just getting started, it's the first week and I don't really know who to go to or who to ask. One, ask your coaches. All right, ask the people around the gym, ask people, or I'm sorry, ask the people around your school. All right, those are probably going to be the easiest resources to get in contact with, right? The second resource I will give you is all of the information that we just discussed is online at Horton Barbell YouTube, right? So those videos that I pulled to show you guys, we have former athletes that we basically took and filmed them doing every single thing and put it online for that exact moment, coach. So if you're getting into the weight room and you're like, oh man, I don't really know how to do this. Where do I go to find out how to do this? Take whatever movement it is. Let's say it's a barbell incline press, and I YouTube barbell incline press Horton barbell, and it's going to pop up with not only the video but then coaching cues of how to do it. And then the next piece I would say is don't just do your training and don't just do your workouts by yourself. Get with other guys and get with other people because odds are people are going to have the same questions as you.
When you have incoming freshmen, and they already have established a way of working out, and when they come into you guys and you realize just how bad it is, how easy is it for them to transition to what you guys your standard?
It's it takes longer, I'll tell you that. Um, so we take all of our incoming freshmen and we basically, like we talked about at those early slides, building a base, right? We take all of our incoming freshmen, no matter how good or not good of a lifter you are, and we start on what we call a level zero program, where we want to see how you lift, we want to see how you bend, we want to see how you move. If we have a guy who comes in who doesn't have good technique or hasn't trained the right way, it's going to immediately add another month of time on a lower level program for him because we need to establish those things before we start going and lifting with the rest of the team. Well, the rest of the team's over there squatting heavy and power cleaning and sprinting fast and doing all the fun things. You've got to be able to establish the basics first before you can progress, which is probably the most important thing for young high school athletes is that that's not just us. I've worked at 4 universities now with a lot of different strength staffs, and every single one does the same thing. If we have a guy who comes in and can't handle doing the basics the right way, we're going to continue to work on the basics until we get good at them. So, all the stuff we talked about, and the reason I said technique and form about 50 times is because if you can dominate that first before you get here, you're only spending a couple of days on that level zero program, and then you're progressing to the rest of the guys where you're cleaning and squatting and doing all those things.
How should weightlifting during the off season and during the season differ between each?
That's a good question. So in the off season, right, the biggest difference is in the off season, we're lifting more often, right? We're lifting maybe 3 or 4 times a week. In season, we're probably only lifting 2, maybe 3 days a week. The biggest difference in the weight room is how much work we are actually doing. We're still going to hit some heavy weights in season, right? Because I want to keep all the strength that I built in the off season. The difference is I'm not doing as many total reps, right? If I were to look at what we do with our football players in season, guess what? We're still going to do a squat variation in season. But in the off season, I might be doing 25 or to 35 total reps of a back squat, right? I might be hitting a couple sets of 5 and then working up to a heavy set of 3, right? In season, we might only be doing 10 to 15 total reps, right? And we'll hit maybe a heavy single or a heavy double. So that way we stay strong. We still touch some heavy weights, but we're not doing as many reps. The reason we don't do as many reps, the more reps you do, the more sore you're going to be, right? If you think about some of your harder workouts, the days that you go hit a heavy single on squat, you're not going to be super sore. It's going to be the days where you're in there doing a lot of sets of five, six, seven, and eight that you're really sore. So we want to eliminate that soreness while still keeping strength as high as we can.
Aiden, what would you say for a young man who can't necessarily access the gym for whatever reason?
Mhm.
What would you say is the best case scenario for him to do at home if he doesn't have access to weights?
So if you don't have access to weights, the number one thing you should do is get out and sprint, get out and run, because that's going to directly correlate to the field. Now, from a weight room perspective, if I don't have access to a weight room where I can't get into the gym, schedule or work or whatever it is, dominate the body weight stuff as well as you can. Push-ups, air squats, reverse lunges, and then pull-ups. If you can do those four things and do them very well, you're still going to get a lot stronger. So, push-ups, pull-ups, bodyweight squats, and then single leg work of any sort, whether that's a reverse lunge, a lateral lunge, a walking lunge, any of that stuff, you're still going to get stronger, right? It might not be as effective as maybe hitting some heavier weights. You're still going to add some strength, though.
Coach Aiden,
Yes, sir.
what are the benchmarks for your testing? Like, do you guys have benchmarks for bench press, squats, certain numbers by the position, or are you just looking for technique when they come into camps?
When kids get here, it's technique first.
Okay.
So for example, in the summer, when we get the majority of our new freshmen, our new incoming kids, that none of them max, none of them train for a heavy single.
Okay.
We want to develop a base first, like the stuff we talked about in those early slides. We want to develop work capacity. We want to see their technique first, and then as we build them, we'll creep into those heavy weights. For our kids that have been training with us for over a year, we don't necessarily have a benchmark because we don't chase numbers. When I say chase numbers, I don't look for X amount of 500-pound squats. I really don't care about that. Just because you squat 500 pounds doesn't make you a better football player, right? Just because you bench 300 pounds doesn't make you a better football player. So we don't necessarily chase numbers. We just chase good technique, good form, and then pushing yourself to, like, if it's a heavy single day, pushing yourself to a number you can get. So the only real benchmarks that we track, we'll track 300-pound cleans, because if you can clean 300 pounds, you're pretty powerful and pretty explosive. And that doesn't matter if you're a big guy or a little guy. If you can clean 300 pounds, that's pretty impressive. And then for benching, we don't really have a benchmark because like I said, we just want technique and great work. And then squat, it's not necessarily a benchmark, but we actually cut our guys when they reach a certain percentage of their body weight. So, for example, when a guy reaches 2.2 times his body weight, that's when we're good on squat. So, for example, if you weigh 200 pounds, right? Once you squat about 440 to 460, we're good. I don't need to see you squat any heavier than that because what's our risk reward going to be? Are you going to get that much stronger on the field, or are we just pushing to add 5 more pounds to that number? So, no, the long answer to your question, no, we truly don't have really any benchmarks, but we do have a couple things that we look at.
Okay, that's awesome. If I can continue, so should the kids be looking at 40-yard dash, broad jump, vertical? What are your little marks that you guys look for in your camps? Do you guys test them on those type of things?
Yeah, so when kids were like if any of your high schoolers came to a football camp here, um, they would do a broad jump test, they would do a 40-yard dash, they would do a pro agility, which is a 5-10-5.
Yeah.
And our coaches look at that and compare them to the rest of the campers. Now for us and what we do in the weight room, like I said, we talked about the weight room stuff. On the field, we'll look at the 5-10-5 as we develop our speed training. But then our actual speed work that we do, we don't really time them. We just have them line up and race. Because one of the best ways that you can get fast times or fast speeds out of guys is make it competitive. So we really don't look at numbers or speeds or miles per hour. We just want to line up and sprint.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. All right. Well, last thing, because I know it's starting to get late and I appreciate you guys all for being here. Um, my contact info is this email right here, aidanreal@buffalo.edu. If you have any questions, any thoughts, comments, concerns that you want to reach out and ask me, feel free. Please, I'm an open book. I will answer anything you got. If you want to watch anything that we do at Buffalo, our head strength coach, Coach Horton, posts everything on social media. That is his Instagram of Horton Barbell. And then, like I mentioned before, for Jason's question, if you have any questions about technique or like, man, I'm not really sure how to do this, this YouTube, we have a library of everything that we do. Everything that we do is in this library, so you can see exactly what it looks like. And then the last piece, which Sean and I talked about before we started tonight. All right, we have a coaches clinic on the 15th of April where it'll primarily be football based, but we'll have 30 minutes where actually we'll do a weight room presentation, which will be a little bit more hands-on than, me talking to you from a camera, where we'll actually go over some form and some technique and some stuff that you can do with your athletes. And then the first week of June, we will have a speed and a strength clinic here in the weight room at Buffalo, where we'll take guys and basically over a 3 hour block, we'll introduce you to how we warm up, how we progress through a run, and then how we progress into the weight room and some of the movements that we do in here.